It's been quite a while since I put out one of these tech-related videos. Quite a few months, in fact. I've been wanting to do a follow-up video about my experience with the Osmo Pocket, particularly in relation to travel videos, but I figured I would put out a few of my travel videos first. A couple of weeks ago I put out the last of the Antarctica series, so I figured this was probably as good a time as any to put out one of these videos. So here goes. Let's talk about the DJI Osmo Pocket. Alright, welcome back. I'm Sean Fox, this is Made to Ramble. Now, those who've been watching this channel recently are aware that Alex and I've just returned from an epic vacation. We spent 6 weeks roaming around South America, and that also includes a 10-day cruise to Antarctica, which has to have been one of the most exciting experiences that either of us has ever had. If you've considered checking out Antarctica yourself, I would highly recommend doing so. It's not cheap, but for us it was worth every cent, and I don't think there was a single person on that cruise who regretted spending the money. Anyway, getting back to the Osmo Pocket, when DJI first announced the release of this camera, I was pretty damn excited. Knowing that I had this holiday coming up, the Osmo Pocket just looked like the perfect travel companion. I mean, you know, Alex is a pretty good travel companion too, but if I had to choose, I'd take her. And by her, I mean Doris here. My Osmo Pocket. My precious. That was a pretty terrible impression. Anyway, the idea that I could just have this thing tucked away in my pocket, ready to go no matter where I was or what I was doing, was hugely appealing. I mean, I could do the same with a GoPro, I guess, but this is a gimbal stabilized camera. It means that I can achieve smooth pans and slider type moves. It's only got a tiny sensor, but it can achieve a little bit of shallow depth of field, and it's just a totally different aesthetic to an action camera. The GoPro has a much wider field of view, and consequently everything in both the foreground and the background tends to be in focus. This can of course be of benefit, you know, you're not having to worry about setting your focus, you just switch it on and away you go, but this can also be kind of limiting in the way that your shots end up looking. I'm personally a big fan of the 28mm focal length that the Osmo Pocket has. It can be pretty cinematic looking. There's a bunch of great movies that tended to favour this focal length. You know, much of Schindler's List, for instance, was filmed at a 28mm focal length, I believe. Alright, so let's take a look at a shot that I was able to achieve with the Osmo Pocket that would not have been possible with a GoPro. Just take a look at this pan here. I don't know that it was actually planned for the shot to come out that way. I think it was mostly just a fluke, but I love the way that it's turned out. It manages to look just a little cinematic while adding a sense of depth, revealing the environment, and with the others in the shot looking on in awe. It just tells a much more dramatic story than what you would get from a wide shot at the back of the boat. That said though, it wasn't all good, because the narrower focal length also makes it difficult to film ourselves in the boat. In some instances it was just too small a space to capture everything, which is why we also brought a GoPro along. Here's another shot that I couldn't have achieved with a GoPro. Here's what that would have looked like if I had filmed it with a GoPro. Alright, maybe I'm exaggerating a little there, but not all that much. This said though, here's a shot that I could only have achieved with a GoPro, at least until the underwater case finally comes out for the Osmo Pocket. Different tools for different jobs. So let's now talk about the cons, although I do have to preface that as best I can tell, most of these cons seem to have been resolved already with recent firmware. I was using a much earlier firmware version while in South America and Antarctica, and there have been quite a few updates since then. I've not had much of a chance to test it out since updating though, but from what I've seen from other videos on YouTube, the results have been pretty impressive. The main issue, of course, is autofocus. So this is an example of where it's probably wise to really familiarize yourself with new gear before you head off on the adventure of a lifetime. The Osmo Pocket has an option to use autofocus continual or just autofocus single. I was trying not to complicate things too much with this camera. I really just wanted to be able to whip it out and hit record. So pretty much throughout the 6 weeks, I was using continuous autofocus. And I only realized when I got home and was starting to edit on a larger screen that the continuous autofocus was causing pulsing backward and forward pretty much any time that I moved the camera at all. So this was a little distracting and meant that I've had to do some pretty creative editing to avoid those distracting bits. Oftentimes I've been slowing the footage down and trying to edit around where the Osmo has refocused. This is a little easier said than done. Had I realized what an issue this would be, I would have opted to use AFS instead. You live and learn, and it does seem at least that this issue is fixed somewhat. The latest firmware update introduced phase detect autofocus, so I'm pretty keen to put that to the test. Okay, so let's talk about audio now. I recently bought the dongle, which now allows me to connect the external mic to the Osmo Pocket, but this was not available while I was away. That said though, I was hugely impressed with the internal mics. They managed to pick up some beautiful clean audio throughout the trip. Just take a listen to this.
As long as we keep our eyes peeled, we might find we're in the right.
Of course, if conditions had been windier, then the internal mics would have been fairly useless. Although you can reduce some of the wind noise by using a foam windscreen, like so. So now let's talk about low light. If you're watching this, then chances are this isn't the first Osmo Pocket review type video that you've watched, so I probably don't need to tell you that the Osmo Pocket is better in low light than a GoPro. There's 1,000 videos comparing the two. This sensor is still pretty small though, so you aren't going to get stellar results in low light, nor is the dynamic range especially great. All of these videos were filmed in Cine D just to squeeze out a little dynamic range where I could, but you can't expect miracles with a sensor this small. The footage from the Osmo Pocket is hardly going to compare with that of the GH5, and the low light's not even close to my Sony full frame. But I was still really impressed with some of the footage that I got from this camera in conditions that were less than ideal. You're sacrificing some quality in exchange for convenience of having such a compact, convenient camera, but it's not as much of a compromise as you might expect. So it's probably pretty obvious by now that I don't regret buying this. It's turned out being really useful. I should probably mention, for those who watched my comparison video with the Removu K1, that I have since sold the K1. The Removu was a great piece of kit, and I do highly recommend it to anybody wanting a really great gimbal stabilized all-in-one vlogging setup. I weighed up my options though and ultimately decided that for me there was more value in the convenience of such a small device, and if I needed something a little wider, I already have a GoPro. So that's it. I am trying to shrink my kit down for travel purposes. So that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. I know it's been a while since I put out one of these sort of tech-related videos tend to attract a lot more views than the travel stuff, so I will in future continue to do the odd tech-related video. God knows I need the views. That said, next week's video will be coming from El Calafate in Argentina, where we check out one of the most astonishing sights I've ever seen. A glacier the size of Buenos Aires. So if that sounds interesting to you, keep an eye out for that. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Hit that bell icon if you want to be notified about future videos. Like and comment, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.